He kisses his cousin lustily on top of a picturesque rock.
I love this place!
Ah, the 1980s. The decade of the Gipper, glass-nosed, big hair, when shirtless, muscled men ruled the roost. It was a decade of high testosterone in Hollywood, probably never to be seen again. I've already covered a couple of entries in the fantasy genre from this time period that I, just like many of you, love so well. We've looked at Arnie's Conan, The Sword and the Sorcerer, Deathstalker, but there's one movie that was always lurking in the background when I was growing up in that hallowed time. 1982's The Beastmaster, starring Mark Singer and a very leggy Tanya Roberts, was part of the cultural wallpaper for many of us D&D gamers back then. After a lackluster theatrical run, it seemed to be on HBO at least once a day. It was so ubiquitous that comedians joked about it. I distinctly remember preparing D&D sessions with it playing in the background of my bedroom TV. If both Conan movies were like a fine steak to me, The Beastmaster was comfort food, like McDonald's, or maybe even Arby's. Some say that 90% of life is just showing up. Well, The Beastmaster always showed up. You could not get away from it. It's the girl who's a firm 6 with a great personality and is always there for you, whether you like it or not. The concept of the movie is pretty standard with a twist. The evil priest Mayox serving King Zed. By the way, who's vetting the advisors for the kings in these movies? Am I the only one whose spidey sense would be tingling when this is one of the guys in the waiting room for the interview to be my spiritual advisor? He's played by Rip Torn, who does a pretty good job as the main villain in this story. The only way it could have been better is if, say, the insane Klaus Kinski were cast in the role, which apparently he almost was. Damn, what could have been? So anyway, the evil priest Mayox is warned that he will die at the hand of King Zed's unborn son. So he concocts a story that he needs that unborn son for a sacrifice to their god. The king, understandably, doesn't agree with this, and instead he arrests Mayox. But don't worry, Mayox has a few biblically butter-faced hags working under him that will finish the job for him. One of these Sarah Jessica Parkers casts a spell to transfer the queen's baby inside a cow. She later cuts the baby out and prepares to sacrifice him, but a good Samaritan villager saves the boy and adopts him, naming the lad Dar. Dar enjoys a good childhood with his adopted family and finds out in an encounter with a bear that he can communicate with animals and see through their eyes. Probably a side effect from that weird cow spell. But as we all know, if there's an idyllic village in a 1980s fantasy movie, the freaking Mongol horde is just over the hill, ready to burn it to the ground. And that's exactly what happens here. Even putting their damn houses on 50-foot stilts couldn't save them. I've watched this movie for 35, 40 years now, and still, for the life of me, I can't figure out why they built their houses this way. It didn't help them at all, and it's not like they're on the coast preparing for a tsunami. They seem to be in fantasy Utah. Regardless, the village is indeed burned to the ground by guys that we really don't see much of again till the very end, after a false ending that Peter Jackson would have been proud of. Dar escapes the slaughter, thanks to his dog, who drags him away from the carnage with an arrow in him before dying. Ouch. This makes Dar sort of the proto-John Wick, I guess. And that's not even the most gut-punching animal death in the movie. The only ones who have it worse than the animals in Beastmaster are the kids. They all seem to walk around with a bullseye on their back. I haven't seen this many children endangered on screen since that lost episode of Ruby Frank's 8 Passengers. Now, without those pesky family ties, Prince Dar strikes out on his own and, using his powers and his wits, he gathers around him essentially a traveling zoo. There's the eagle Shirok, who is the party scout. He finds ferrets named Kodo and Podo who act like the thieves, and Haru, a fighting tiger that the director dyed black for some reason to make look like a panther. I mean, it's a fantasy world. I'm not sure why they didn't just keep him a tiger. Anyway, I like the animals as stand-ins for a traditional adventuring party. It's a nice little twist. He is the Beastmaster after all. Dar eventually runs into Kiri, a slave girl played by Tanya Roberts, who's actually King Zed's niece, which would make her his cousin. He doesn't know that yet, but Dar does indeed develop a crush on her. I know. Don't think too hard on it. It was the 80s. Things like this happened back then. He eventually finds his way to Uruk. The city has a nice pyramid as a set piece for the movie. But it must be said that the models used in some scenes of the movie are not very good, especially when you consider that other movies in the era managed to film in pretty magnificent locales with very believable miniatures. At Uruk, Dar watches the evil Maox try to sacrifice a little girl and intercedes, using the eagle Sharak to carry the girl away. Yes, this was slightly ridiculous even when I was 13 years old, but who cares? This movie is goofy fun. After disrupting the child sacrifice, Dar is naturally put on Maox's radar, and he sends his flunkies to track him down with a really cool magical ring, worked in part by the remaining hags. Dar takes care of the B-team with a little bit of help from a couple of pilgrims he meets. There's Seth, played by the great John Amos, who served his real father, King Zed. There's also Tal, who is, unbeknownst to Dar, his younger brother. Or stepbrother, maybe. Not quite sure on that one. Now the crew decides to go after and free the slave girl, Kiri. Unfortunately, the ferrets have stolen the eye ring off of one of those corpses, and Prince Tal seemed to take a shine to it, not knowing what it was. So now Maox can watch their every move. Kiri is rescued in a rather straightforward manner. Then they all go after King Zed, who's being held under that pyramid. This is the most D&D part of the movie, with the crew sneaking in, avoiding traps, and battling their way out, prize in hand. King Zed, who still doesn't realize that Dar is his son, thinks that Dar is too soft for not wanting to make the sands run red with blood. Dar is exiled, and predictably, their plan without him is doomed. Everyone's captured and ready to be sacrificed. Fortunately, Dar doesn't take no for an answer. He comes in at what we think is the climax and turns the tide, rescuing everyone except Zed, who has a grand total of about 1 second to realize that Dar is indeed his son before he's unceremoniously shanked. And just when you think Maox is dead, he is revived and about to do in our hero, but the ferret Kodo jumps on the priest's neck and sacrifices himself by forcing the evil priest into the sacrificial fires. And I gotta say, I just rewatched this movie again, and it still hits home. Press F in the comments for poor Kodo. Now this is where the movie ends emotionally, but you've still got 20 minutes more of a pointless battle against the Juns, who were supposedly helping Maox seize power all along, but I suppose they did destroy Dar's village, so revenge must be served. It's just a real disappointment that this last act couldn't have been structured a bit differently, so that you actually care a little bit more about the battle. Dar and the lead Jun duke it out, and Dar wins, but there's still too many Juns left, but fear not. The good guys are rescued in time from the remaining Juns by a bunch of tall birdmen, ones that he met back in the second act of the movie. They nod at Dar, and I suppose it's all water under the bridge that these guys imprisoned and horrifically ate an innocent teenage boy right in front of him early on. In the denouement, Dar finds out who he really is, but says that the wounded and recovering Tal will make a far better king than he ever would. He and Seth say their goodbyes, and we find out that Podo has twins. Hoorah. At the very end, he kisses his cousin lustily on top of a picturesque rock. And we are done. At least until Beastmaster 2, 3, and the series come out later on. Now, do I love this movie? Of course I do. Does the Beastmaster have some jarring and at times hilarious flaws? Of course it does. I was also never a really big Tanya Roberts fan, especially after her performance in From a View to a Kill. Apparently the director wanted Demi Moore in her role, which would have been interesting indeed. A Beastmaster with her as Kiri and Klaus Kinski as Maox probably would have been some next level shit indeed. Alas, this is the Beastmaster we got, and it's still pretty good. In today's era where messaging and increasingly boring visual effects seem to be thrown into every movie in this genre, even Beastmaster's faults kind of become charming. Mark Singer does a great job, and he's in fine shape here. And you do view his animal companions as legitimate characters with personality. When Kodo sacrifices himself, it does pack the emotional punch they were probably aiming for. Overall, there's a lot to like here, but if the movie had been edited just a little bit better and a few scenes shot a little differently, this would have been a classic on its own merits instead of just being known as the pretty good movie that was shown endlessly. If you haven't seen Beastmaster, give it a watch. And if you're like me, you've already seen it many times, go ahead for that extra viewing. It's like Jell-O. There's always room for more. Tell me what you guys thought of the Beastmaster. Is it a classic at this point, or is it a little bit overrated? Let me know in the comments below, would you? Remember to join us also every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for The Lair. That's our weekly live stream. It's always a great time where I hang out with a couple of friends and we talk about RPG events of the day and talk to interesting people. And we would love to see you there. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I look forward to talking to you guys very, very soon. Goodbye.